Shabbat Shalom. It is good to be able to share a very joyous time together. Alec, you really gave us all a lot of great pleasure this morning. So we share Shabbat and we share Rosh Chodesh. We share in the beautiful music of this service, and also we share in the sense of accomplishment. For many years, as the rabbi here, there used to be rabbis from a generation ago, some of the great rabbis, mostly from the New York metropolitan area, who retired to Boca Raton and would spend at least part of their year here in this area and come to B'nai Torah for Shabbat services. And that generation has died off. But I noticed that Rabbi Charlie Klein is with us. So Rabbi Klein, you are beginning a new generation of retired rabbis here. I welcome you. It's very good to see you here. Shabbat Shalom. It used to be, I want to speak about a few things. The story of Noah is a story that is so popularly known, so widely known in culture, partially because of the art that you see as a function of that story. And there's been a lot of music actually written about Noah and the flood. And so it's often taken as a rather simple story. We teach it in preschools and Hebrew schools. But it is actually, there are greater complexities in the story. And I would like to unpack, as we say, some of those complexities. Before I do so, however, I heard a story yesterday from my youngest son. And it's related to the following. It is related to what both Alec and I spoke about in relation to the ark and to this comfortable space and the sanctuary where we find our religion, and then the challenge to go outside with it. For a long time in the conservative movement, the balance between modernity and tradition was the central concern of rabbis in synagogues. How do we enter into, especially after World War II, how do we enter into American culture without assimilating fully? What is it that we need to preserve, and what can we hold on to that we're being introduced to in a larger culture? And in that challenge and in that conversation, certain holidays of on the American calendar began to be thought about in different ways and spoken about. So I do remember early in my years as a rabbinate, I know this specifically went on in our day schools. What do you do with Halloween? A festival that is essentially an early pagan festival. And as Jews, do we have our kids celebrate that or not? By the way, that is really not a problem anymore. It's a battle. If it was a battle, it's a battle that we lost. And also we understand that our kids, nor do we take it as a pagan festival, but rather as a time where communities can come together and kids can eat candy and have fun, and the deeper meaning of the holiday isn't really thought about. Anyway, my son, my 36-year-old son, lives in Western Massachusetts, and he lives on it's not a cul-de-sac, but it's a street you drive into, and it's a big circle, and then you can drive out of it. And he and his wife and his two kids, they're the only Jewish family in this circle. But they do Halloween there because there's so many other kids doing it, and the kids enjoy it. And as I asked one of my grandchildren, I said, "What kind of candy do you like?" And the grandchild said to me, "Oh, I like Halloween candy." Anyway, my 2-year-old Elle goes to the first home, and she's in a costume, and she's carrying a little bucket, a pumpkin bucket, and she goes to the house, and they ring the doorbell, and she's with her older 4-year-old brother, and the woman comes out with some candy and puts it into the bucket, and my daughter-in-law says to Elle, "what do you say?" And she looks up at the woman who gave her the candy and says, "Shana Tova." So whatever their challenges are, I know that they're doing a decent job. So let's look at some of the issues around around Noah. If you were told that somebody was a transitional character, a person who filled the gap between what was and what would be, would you think that person has great importance? Probably not. Rather, you would think that person really doesn't play a very important role. Yet the reality is that transitional people are very important for the continuity of culture, history, and actually for the stability in life, the stability that we look for. Years ago, I used to preach about this, especially to B'nai Mitzvah kids, and I would say the following: we, the Jewish people, take history very seriously. To have a Jewish life, one has to know their past, where we come from. We have to know about our grandparents and our great-grandparents and generations before. And we have to allow that past to live on through us in order for us to be able to flourish into the future. And so it's important that we view ourselves in the metaphoric chain of history. We are a link in that chain. And when we deny that, we can break the bonds that tie us to our past, our people, and our responsibilities for the future. When asked why he does what he does, the fictional Tevye, the dairyman of Shalom Aleichem stories, or as we know him best, the fiddler on the roof, you remember he said one thing. He said, tradition. And a song was born. Tradition, in fact, may be the vehicle for the preservation of what was, and the continuity, often through ritual, of practices in order to allow the values that are central to our lives and our people to continue. I think we read about a transitional figure today, and that was this fellow named Noah. And although his story stands out in the stories that we tell ourselves, we tell our people, and he wasn't a Hebrew, he was not an early Jew. He creates a link between the creation of humanity in the beginning of Genesis, which we read about last week, and then the beginnings of our people. Noah in no way is unimportant. He was necessary. He was necessary for a transition to take place that would allow us to become a people who would bring a message to the world and, in fact, change things. Certain times in history call for these types of people, and they can lead to incredible change. It's not that they are mediocre. It's that they remind us of something from the past that needs to be brought forward, something from the past also that perhaps may need change in order to create a better future. So who's Noah? He might have been a carpenter. He was a shipbuilder for sure. He might have been a farmer in an ancient agrarian society, and perhaps he was a herder who could find the best couple in every herd. Truthfully, we don't know. We learn one thing about him before he received his calling. He found grace in the eyes of God. Chaim. We learn that he was a righteous man in his generation, and we learn that he walked with God. We also know that he lived during a time of corruption and lawlessness. That's how our Bible, the one in front of us, translates the word that's often translated as violence. If you read that section, you see the word used in Hebrew is Hamas. That's way before any of us knew of a famous or infamous terrorist organization. In the story, God is overwhelmingly disappointed, radically disappointed with his creation. If we step back, we see that at some point he created this perfect place, this wonderful garden for his creation to live. And we read about the sin of the first couple and their expulsion from that garden. And then after that expulsion, their sons, one of whom commits the very first act of murder, of fratricide, as Cain kills his brother Abel. Generations come and generations go, and God, the Creator, views his creation with incredible disappointment. So much so that the violence and the corruption which he sees in his creation makes him want to delete everything he created. And so he wants to cause a flood that will destroy the world. But perhaps he has a second thought. Maybe something went wrong with that first creation, and he'll give it another shot. And so he doesn't give up on humanity completely. No, he finds this kind, blameless, righteous person in his generation and commands him to build the ark because he tells them there's a flood coming. And Noah is a faithful servant, if nothing else. Or is it that Noah just wants to save his own life and the life of his family? It seems to more likely be the case. For if he were someone who was truly righteous, our rabbis taught, he would have attempted to save his neighbors. Or if he were truly righteous, he would have done what Abraham after him did, and that is, he would have bargained with God. He would have protested. He would have said, surely, God, there may be 50 or 40 or 20 or 10 righteous people. Why destroy the whole world? Noah did neither of these things. The flood came and the flood went. And Noah left the ark and did something that's not unusual for one who has just experienced trauma. He uses the substance that he has grown to love. And he gets drunk, and then he is abused by his sons. Remember that Noah does not play much of a role in furthering God's creation or God's purpose. So why is the story here? It's a great story, and perhaps, as I mentioned before, that we keep it alive because of the depictions of Noah and the ark and the animals. But I want to offer another suggestion. It's the suggestion that he is this transitional figure. In the annals of the literature of the ancient Near East, we know there are many, many flood stories. This story, however, is the only one which has survived and become part of a culture. It's the only flood story that continues to be told in a contemporary setting, because it's very different than the other stories. The other stories, there's a great flood that destroys much of the known world, and then each of the surviving stories, and in each of those stories which we have learned about that have survived, it's a function of warring gods. The gods want to show who the most powerful one is, who can bring the flood that will destroy the world. And the act of creating a flood seems to be purely random. This is a story that's different, because this story is not about a random flood. It's not about gods fighting with gods, but it's about people's behavior. This is not a God who's flexing his muscles to show, I am the most powerful. This is about a God who's concerned with the behavior of people. Corruption and violence pains God, and that's what will lead to destruction. Floods come when humanity is irreverent towards each other or towards their environment. It seems that because this story is read during this time of year, as Alex said, that often coincides with hurricanes and floods even here, it's one that we take note of in a different way. And it is particularly noteworthy that in Spain this week, within a period of less than a single day, more rains fell in Valencia than typically fall in an entire year, and tens of people were killed. And so we take note. Well, let's go back to this character of Noah and his sons. Again, we see fairly corrupt people. And again, we can feel empathy for God's disappointment. Noah did not ultimately walk away from the ark or the flood as a better man. God, however, exits the story with a promise. God himself realizes that he was unable to create a perfect partner in man. He has a different perception of the world he created and the work which he had done, and perhaps even what the goals will be. So I imagine there's a type of divine reflection that takes place whereby God brings this rainbow that we're familiar with as a sign of the covenant that God will no longer destroy the earth. You can be violent, you can be an imperfect human being as you are, but the world is going to go on. Ironically, though, it is we, the human beings, who have the capacity to destroy the world. And in that way, perhaps we are godlike. The rainbow is the sign. The rainbow is meant to give us hope. So in the first parsha, Bereshit, we see the repetition of God's vision of the world. And he saw that it was good, and he saw that it was good, and he believed that it was good, and he teaches us that it's good. He's created for us a universe which can be good. The word repeated the most, however, in the second section, in this one with Noah, is Brit. And you know, Brit means covenant. It's no longer a universe that will be sustained by goodness. Now there's the implication of a world that will be sustained through relationship, a relationship of obligation. And so it's the beginning of a covenant between God and humanity. God lets us know he will not destroy the world. He's shown us the sign of his obligation, his commitment. But a brit, a covenant, takes two sides. There are two parties that sign contracts. People in this world have power. People in this world have control. As we often hear, each one of us has agency. And I too often think that this is the failure of the message in contemporary religious spheres. And so we see that people are praying to God to save people or to end the war or to fix the environment. But this is the job of us. This is the job of the people. And so the focus is misplaced. And much greater part of the focus should be placed on us. There's a God who is not always perfect. We find this God who's disappointed in his work, in the people he created. However, we have the possibility of being better. So I get back to Noah as this transitional figure. The book begins with creation and the works of the Creator. And the Creator sees his work and he's profoundly disappointed. He expels that first family from the garden, but life doesn't get any better at all. Corruption and violence fill the world. And God reflects, and God sees that he will not be known through all the people of the world, but rather he'll make himself known through a particular people that may hear his call and take up their side of the bargain. And once again, then it will start with one man, one person, Abraham. And God will tell him to leave the world where he resides to start a new people with his family in a new land which God promises. Lech lecha me'artzecha. We'll read that next week. And this man and his people will now live or should live with a sense of obligation. An obligation to do what is right and to do what is just. An obligation to a God and to goodness. Will they always succeed? No. But the obligation remains. And so Abraham's to create a people upon whom these words, which are stated over and over and over again, will live. Tzedek and mishpat, righteousness, goodness, law and justice. God realizes he cannot make his will known to all of humanity, but he needs someone who will accept the call, who will accept the responsibility. And what we have to learn is it starts with one person. And who's that person? It's you. It's every one of you. It's me. It's every one of us. Noah was a good guy. He was good, but he couldn't transcend his own place or his own time or even himself. He could not look beyond himself. I think one of the great beauties of our ancient tradition and our Torah is not that it is original, because we know there are stories that come before it from which the Torah borrows. But rather it takes those stories and those narratives and the laws from ancient Near East and creates a different meaning from them. It's the meaning of the power of the individual in our decision making. And this is what we need during these weeks as we read these narratives and live our lives, finding inspiration from those whose legacy has lived on through this Torah for thousands and thousands of years. And the bottom line is that the world can be a better place. It can be habitable. It can be filled with nations that live with peace and not live solely through grace. Nor can we depend on a God alone or a Savior of any kind. Rather, it's through entering this covenant where we commit ourselves to honor, respect, and sustain our world, where we become responsible actors in supporting humanity by, amongst other things, being counted amongst those who create peace. This is the covenant that God makes with us. He will be our God. He will allow humanity to be sustained. And we can be his people if we're willing to live by a law that makes us partners to improve the world. Back to Tevye, to life l'chaim. May the Lord protect and sustain all of us, and may we realize that we are, all of us, given the opportunity to be partners in the incredible venture of this world. And we can't forget it. It just doesn't happen. Each and every one of us are transitional characters. Each and every one of us has inherited so much good in the lives that we're living. So may we live with an appreciation for that and a realization of our own responsibilities to fix the world. Tradition is only meaningful if we use it to create a better tomorrow. May God bless all of us. May we all understand that blessing comes when we are the blessings. Shabbat Shalom.